Other big issue came out last year in October, the Large Aircraft Security Program. We had just put the final touches on last year's NBAA convention, and out comes the TSA with their new proposal for large aircraft security. They got it wrong at every level. First problem was they said this is going to be a large aircraft security program, and then they immediately applied it to very small aircraft, aircraft weighing 12,500 pounds. They said it was necessary because airplanes weighing 12,500 pounds were similar to the airplanes that were used in the 9/11 attacks. You can take a 12,500 pound airplane and put it sideways in the fuselage of the planes that were used in the attacks. It would fit front windshield to back bulkhead sideways. It's a small airplane. It's not a large aircraft, and the Large Aircraft Security Program shouldn't apply to airplanes that small. The other thing they did wrong was they took all the commercial regulations and applied it. They missed the fact that this is a non-commercial operation. They missed the fact that the people who go on these airplanes are known to the owners. They're the guests. They're in the invitees. The Large Aircraft Security Program had 82 items that it was not going to allow you to take on your own airplane, including things like tools. So if you're a tool company, you can't take your own products on the airplane. It wasn't going to let you take golf clubs on your own airplane. So if you are Callaway or Taylor or some other sporting goods company, you couldn't take your own products on your own airplane. It was crazy. And we told them it was crazy. NBAA and AOPA, immediately we came out, we said this is 263 pages of nonsense. You've given us 60 days to comment. That's not enough time. We want more time. Unfortunately, they gave it to us. And then we said, there aren't enough people that know exactly what you've proposed. We want you to go around the country and do a series of public hearings and explain to them what you want to do. And so they decided they would do 5 public hearings. They did in New York, Chicago, Atlanta, out in Houston, out in California. And these things were oversubscribed. People flew in, drove in, whatever it took to get there, all for an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes. NBAA spoke first at all of those to try to set the tone. We had some pre-meetings, but the spontaneous reaction from the community was overwhelming. We also followed that up asking a number of members of Congress to weigh in. We ultimately generated over 7,000 comments to the docket, and I'm pleased to report to you that I think that this outpouring of community support, or opposition I should say, has made a fundamental difference. This summer, the House Committee on Homeland Security held a hearing. The TSA testified, and they said some pretty key things. They said they recognize the weight limit's too low. They're going to raise it. They recognize some of the third-party stuff where third-party audits were coming in was silly. They weren't going to do it. They said they were going to get rid of the prohibited items list. They said they were not going to allow federal air marshals to board any airplane over 100,000 pounds and demand transportation. So I think we've made a lot of real progress with them. Now, I don't want to get too optimistic about it because I think we're at that point where we've talked to them, they've talked to us, and we feel like we've had a meeting of the minds. We feel like we've come down to an idea that we really ought to let the pilot decide who's going to be on the airplane and what they're going to bring on board. And if that means a couple extra background checks on the pilot, we can understand that, but let's put the authority for security with the pilot. They've said that. We've said that. We think we have a meeting of the minds, but we're now at that point where we said, okay, we've agreed to this. Let's have the lawyers go write it up. We're anxious to see what that agreement looks like when it comes back from the lawyers. But at least on this point, I think we've made good progress. And I think it's because we've had a good community effort and we've all stayed together, we've stayed informed, and I think that has helped. The environmental issues that are out there are real, they're significant, they are probably going to grow more significant, and that is going to be a great challenge for our industry. A lot of you know that the European Union has already passed an emissions trading scheme, with scheme being the operative word, that is really not, my opinion, designed to facilitate the environment. It's designed to fund a lot of European programs. And it is an absurd overreach of their authority. They are trying to tax international operations, regardless of the fact that they may not start in the European Union. They want to tax our emissions on planes flying from the US into the European Union. They want to start the meter when a plane leaves Los Angeles, flies across the United States, goes across international waters, lands in Shannon. They want to tax the emissions of that entire flight. Now, we are working with the government to try to challenge some of that. We hope that the US government will be strong, but I think what we can recognize is that what the Europeans are proposing is not only significant harm for the operations going there, but could be a harbinger of what happens in the rest of the world. And so we're looking at the environmental issues as very significant issues. We think they ought to be handled at the International Civil Aviation Organization in Montreal. We think we shouldn't have a patchwork of environmental regulations, but we ought to have a thorough approach. And any revenues that are raised as a result of emissions ought to go back into making the aviation system more efficient. I mean, the absurdity of what they're proposing is any money raised through aviation emissions is then going to go fund some social program or something else. That's wrong. Here in the United States, I think most of you know, their cap and trade proposal has been through the House of Representatives. It's currently on the back burner in the Senate while they're working on health care reform and some other issues. But this is an issue that's going to be with us for a long time. And it's an issue that's going to require our community to be at the top of its game. Finally, I mentioned that as we at NBAA try to find a way to foster an environment that allows business aviation to thrive, part of doing that is promoting positive industry practices, helping people know how they can operate more efficiently or more safely or more securely. The way we typically do that is we go out to the community, we bring in groups, we have them work with us to distill what are the best practices, how do we do this, and then we try to get that information back out to the community. Sometimes it's through a educational CD, sometimes it's done through conferences and seminars. This is a primary way that we try to improve the image of business aviation, improve the safety of business aviation, improve the security, the viability, to try to make sure that people know business aviation is essential. One of the biggest places where we do this every year is at our annual meeting and convention coming up in Orlando, October 20, 21, and 22. We hope all of you will be there. We think this is one of the most important NBAAs because this is one of the most critical times in the history of our industry. We feel like we've got a really exciting opening general session. We're going to have the FAA administrator there. We're going to have Rich Karlgaard, editor of Forbes magazine, will be there, and a pilot. We're going to have Tom Buffenbarger, president of the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers. And we're going to have golfing icon and small business entrepreneur Arnold Palmer, all talking about the fact that business aviation is essential to our nation's economy and our air transportation system. So we hope all of you will be there. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to be back in Kansas, be home again, and have an opportunity to address the Wichita Aero Club. I'd now like to take any questions you may have.
So Ed, on the emissions trading thing, as a manufacturer, our customers are asking us, what do we do? We now have online applications through ETS. You know, they've got some traction. Should we all be waiting for Congress to have an emissions policy, or is it too late to rebut what's going on today? Because I would submit to you, every one of the manufacturers and their customers is faced with this, and it's, as far as we're concerned, it's already happening.
Yeah. So the European emissions trading scheme doesn't immediately go into effect, but they're asking everybody to register if they have operations as they go into Europe, so they can get a baseline on what operations are going there. And the question that Bob has raised is, should we do that? Should we actually register? We think it's probably appropriate to register. We're not suggesting anyone not. The European regulation said that they will not actually do all of that Los Angeles to Shannon trip if the U.S., in the EU's opinion, passes acceptable environmental regulations. So there's some sense that, well, maybe the U.S. is going to pass this and it won't be the full impact that we're expecting. But I think that the feeling that we have is that let's go ahead and address this where it is. We hope the U.S. government will get more deeply involved. We hope ICAO will assert some jurisdiction. We hope if the U.S. does something, it's rational and reasonable. But as of today, the registration requirements are there, and we're not suggesting you perform any type of civil disobedience on that. It's okay to register.
Yeah, no, we're registering. What I'm concerned about, and I won't take up a lot of space and questions, is between now and when it goes into effect, do we have a chance in hell to turn this thing around, or to have some sort of bilateral in place that it, says our system works in concert with their system? That's what we're looking for.
Well, I think the chance to have a bilateral is very real. I think the chance for the U.S. government to stand up is very real. I personally think that the Europeans have way overstepped their bounds and their authority. I think what their feeling is, gee, if the U.S. wants to take us on in the court of public opinion and say we don't want to participate in your emissions thing, then that's going to be awkward for the U.S. and fine, bring that fight on. But I do think on legal grounds, they've overstepped it. I think on policy grounds, going to ICAO makes a lot more sense. I just think this is an overreach, both from a policy standpoint and from a legal standpoint. But it is what it is, and we'll have to play the cards we're dealt on it.
Has the NBAA taken a position on the repair station, the Bolen repair station issue?
Yeah. So a lot of you know, as part of the House of Representatives bill, there is a requirement in there related to foreign repair stations and whether or not the FAA is going to allow foreign repair stations to operate, or do we need to constantly go and surveil them? Or can we do what we've done in the past, which is recognize that the Europeans are competent to do their own investigations, and if they are comfortable, we can rely on their certification. This is an issue that the House of Representatives has taken a position that the general aviation community, and in fact I think all of the commercial airplanes have as well, been concerned about it. The Senate has got a different approach, one that is much more workable. The general aviation community has been led by the General Aviation Manufacturers Association and strongly supported by NBAA and the other general aviation associations. So our view is we're all in this together. Let's do what makes sense. We think the system that we've had in place makes a lot of sense.